समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
The unfortunate Tejas crash and the pilot's death at Dubai Air Show are a shattering moment. The Indian Air Force, IAF, is too strong, too proud and too professional to let this weight down. That we know. They'll recover immediately. For India's policymakers, however, this is a useful juncture to reflect on whether they've been and are being entirely fair to the IAF given what the force needs, or in the demands they place on the IAF, the expectations they have from it, the compromises and adjustments that they seek. It is also important, however, that we take a deep breath and remind ourselves that pilots are particularly tough people. Among the toughest of them will be found in the IAF because globally they are some of those few who remain perpetually in operational mode. So they know how to take a setback in their strides and move on. It is not to say that the Indian Army and Indian Navy enjoy long tenures in peacetime. They also face operational challenges because for India, given our neighborhood, every time is operational time. IAF stands out for special mention for three reasons. One, it is the first responder in most escalatory or punitive situations. Given the Modi government's every act of terror is an act of war deserving instant retaliation doctrine. Second, because the IAF is the only one of the three services where combat is carried out almost exclusively by its officers, who form a small, tightly knit community where almost everybody knows everybody. And third of the three, the IAF is the most technology dependent. Once again, since we understand the inter-service competition, we must acknowledge that technology is critical to the other two as well. It is just that in the Air Force, the fighting elements, the instruments to guide, control and protect them on the ground all bristle with ever-changing electronics. To the IAF's challenges, we can add a fourth. Unlike the Army and the Navy, where numbers can sometimes still fill technology gaps here and there, the IAF has less leeway. Further, since the capital cost of combat aviation assets is not as high as that for the Navy, it is more possible for Pakistan to keep pace, even get an edge, acquire an edge ahead in some areas, especially because it's customized for air-to-air warfare in very short skirmishes. And the Chinese are always there to help. They will sell, if not their latest, next to their latest to the Pakistanis at any point of time. Since the mid-1950s, when the Americans started giving Pakistan PAF, Pakistan Air Force, the PAF, their latest fighters, the IAF has mostly been forced to play catch-up. In 1965, it fought the Pakistan Air Force with a supersonic and missile advantage in F-104 starfighters. Many of their Sabres also had missiles and the starfighters were also night capable. India did not have any night capable fighters in 1965. By 1971, deepening relations with the Soviet Union brought parity, and in the 70s, the Pakistanis were still recovering from the defeat in the Bangladesh War. By 1984, the picture changed dramatically as the first F-16s arrived, gifted by the United States 5 years after Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. This, however, is not a history or reconstruction of the 7-decade race for air superiority in the subcontinent. It is more about the critical dilemmas India has battled on this front. Of these, Tejas is one outcome and a reasonably good one. It is a brilliant, reasonably priced, mostly homemade aircraft with a stellar safety record, given that only 2 crashes have taken place in 24 years since its first flight. But is it the best we could have done by 2025? My point is, we could have done much better by 2025. Is it still playing catch up with the competition? Tough question. Couldn't we have done this much earlier? Remember that when Manohar Parrikar, as defense minister, arm twisted a reluctant IAF in 2015 to accept Tejas Mark 1A, the deliveries were committed in 2022. I've used the expression arm twisted. The Air Chief Marshal AP Singh had said not long ago that there was a rap on the knuckles, and then the Air Force had accepted this. So the Air Force did accept this, but they were promised deliveries of Mark 1A by 2022. Now we will be fortunate if the first squadron becomes fully operational by early 2027. There is a tactical and strategic price to pay for 5-year delays. Meanwhile, Pakistan has produced several iterations of the JF-17. Right now, they have JF-17 Block 3 with no claims to it being more than 57% indigenous. It is a joint venture of the Pakistan Aircraft Complex, PAC, and Chengdu Aircraft Corporation of China. The Tejas Mark 1A inductions in the next few months might fill some of these gaps, but Hindustan Aeronautics Limited's struggles with synchronizing the new Swadeshi electronic warfare suite with its Elbit Israeli radar and missile integrations and missile firing and some other technologies have increased the delays, and the adversaries, meanwhile, will not stay frozen. They will keep moving. Since these are mostly software issues, these have also deprived Hindustan Aeronautics of the usual excuse of delays in the arrival of the GE engines. Once again, while it is a great idea to have your own fighter, we serve ourselves poorly by being constantly trapped in a catch-up situation. That is central to many air-power dilemmas that we are talking about. In the late 1950s, when the Pakistanis were getting their first sabres, Jawaharlal Nehru's government searched for alternatives, and they thought they'll make a fighter of their own because the Soviet linkage had not yet come up. The commitment to true non-alignment was heady, but it also led to self-denial for the military, especially the IAF. The first IAF jets, Vampires from Britain and the French Dassault Oregon, named Tufani in India, were obsolete on arrival. Oregons, by the way, were inducted in 1953. The IAF's acquisition of British Hunters and the NAT, which the Royal Air Force had discarded, was a quick fix, and the gap with the missile-equipped Sabres and night-capable starfighters remained. Foreseeing this, in the mid-1950s, Nehru decided to build a domestic supersonic fighter. He spotted a German engineer or designer, Kurt Tank. He was the designer of a most successful Luftwaffe fighter, FW-190. FW stands for Focke-Wulf. More than 20,000 copies of which flew and fought in the Second World War. The next model that he made for Focke-Wulf was actually named after him because the German practice changed. Instead of putting other numbers, they started naming their new aircraft also after the designers, just as the Soviets were doing. So that aircraft was TA-152, TA for tank. Since Tank was no Nazi, he was among those in demand internationally. He was initially hired by Argentina, but soon unemployed as Juan Perón lost power. Nehru brought him to India as director of the Madras Institute of Technology. Tank quickly put together a team of Indian engineers. One of them was a young man called APJ Abdul Kalam. The design of what was named HF-24 Marut was great, but there was no engine. There was no engine available for it. The same old problem. In the course of time, Tank left and India persisted. The aspiration of breaking the sound barrier was never realized. This never became a supersonic aircraft. The maximum HF-24 Marut did was Mach 0.93, and that with 2 Orpheus engines, which India was making for the tiny single-engine NAT fighter anyway. A project to build an engine jointly with Egypt failed with some tragic results, with some crashes, but so strong is the fighter nationalism that India still built 147 copies, of which 28 crashed. It was fully retired only in 1985, and nobody in the IAF at that point shed much tear for it. I would add, however, in fairness, that in 1971 war, this aircraft was used specifically in southern Rajasthan Sindh sector, And that's where, in ground attack role, it delivered good results. 3 of the aircraft were lost, all to small arms fire. 1 was destroyed on the ground, but no aircraft was lost in air combat. 1 Indian HF-24 also claimed a Pakistani Sabre destroyed in a dogfight. Nevertheless, that was 1971. Some similar waffling has bedeviled the Tejas. The government first cleared what it then called the Light Combat Aircraft, LCA, in 1983, that India will build its own combat aircraft called Light Combat Aircraft. The head of the DRDO, or Defense Research and Development Organization then, a fine metallurgist V.S. Arunachalam, he was only in his 40s then, he would sometimes say in self-deprecating humor, call it the last chance for Arunachalam. Between him and some brilliant aeronautical scientists, they put together a great team. We had a design ready soon enough. A basic design was ready soon. Then it took another 18 years, from 1983 to 2001, another 18 years to take its first flight, having been named Tejas by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. It took another 15 years for initial operational clearance, or IOC, another further 4 for full operational clearance, FOC. The story continues. This is the short and regrettable story, therefore, of Indian air power getting caught in a desperate 7-decade technology race from behind. Lately, any valid customer's impatience on the part of the IAF, that is, impatience with HAL or demand for new foreign fighters, has been attacked viciously on social media. There are suggestions that until the IAF is willing to accept something maybe 10-15% below the ideal, our domestic technologies cannot progress. Anybody asking for a faster filling of the gaps is dismissed as anti-Indian, anti-indigenous. The forces trained to keep silent, unfortunately, make a poor lobby for themselves, or they would tell you that in a combat, nobody offers you a handicap because you are catching up. The tragic loss in Dubai and the sacrifice of an incredibly skilled young life are an important moment to reflect on our self-inflicted limitations and air power gaps. For clarity, there is nothing to suggest something was wrong with this aircraft or its type, the Tejas Mark I. But if it reminds us of our lackadaisical approach and brings about change, this sacrifice would have achieved something critical important for the IAF and for India.